This is up and down North
Okay.
Jersey.
Yeah, okay.
There's a lake.
All right.
The question, ma'am, was have there been other towns? Has the association reached out to other towns to see if they're doing the same thing? And the gentleman answered yes. And in most of lake communities, this is what they're trying to do. Can't, ma'am, can't speak from there. You'll have to come up to the mic.
My name is Leroy Gearhart. I've lived 60 years at 206 Marcella Road, and I'm not concerned about the $115 as much as most people are, but I'm concerned about the Constitution of the United States, Article 14, that does not allow anybody to assess our property or anything else, and that's what my concern is. Also, we have 2,000 homes plus. Where can we all go if 2,000, maybe 4,000 people go and join the lake? Where do they have a place to let us go and vote? It only holds 93 to 98 members where I was the other day. So now you tell me how they can make us all join when they do not have the facilities to take care of us. Can you give me an answer to that? Nobody up there can. And if nobody has a copy of the Constitution, I have one right here. I also have a copy. I have a copy about the easement. And nowheres in the easement does it say they can put an assessment. It says they can use my land for drainage, put a sidewalk in. This is what is in the easement of this thing. And I never had it said to me until after 30 years when I paid my mortgage off, which was paid off 2 months ahead of time because I always paid it on the 15th and it was due on the 1st. My taxes were paid the 15th of January for February because I don't want to be late, because I don't want you guys to take my property. I've lived there for 60 years and I ain't planning on moving, and my wife will tell you that because my wife tells me we got to move to a bigger place. Now it's only her and me, and my son also still lives with us, and he's 62, because he's not going to go out and buy a house because he wants his money in the bank. That's all I got to say. Now keep in mind about if you need a copy of it, I'll give it to you. If you haven't looked at the Constitution lately. I didn't graduate high school, but I got a dictionary that's that thick.
If you were,
This easement of $115 a year, it's wrong. They are going against the Constitution of the United States, and I think all of you members up here know that. And you got to keep in mind also, there is over 4,000 voters in our area. Keep that in mind, because I voted for every one of you guys last year. But next year's another story. Do you need these copies?
give them to the clerk. Anyone else?
No, you can, ma'am. You can speak on any topic you want.
My name is Mary Pat Belmel. I live at 7 Nokomis Avenue in Lake Hiawatha, and after hearing this, I guess I'm very glad they never developed that lake.
I'm still looking for it.
So I wish you all, I wish everybody the best. I know the town council here will do everything that they can to try and help our town because we all believe in it. I was here, if you may remember, quite passionate last month about a proposal that I wanted to make regarding zoning and the introduction of an accessory use dwelling. I sent in a letter that I believe Khaled had published to everybody. Being somewhat new to these kinds of forums, I'm not aware of the next steps, and I wanted to know what it is that I can do as a citizen to help move this along, and whether you had any questions.
Council President, I had the opportunity to speak to the township planner. Your proposal was referred to the township planner. We've spoken preliminarily. I understand that there may be some pending enforcement actions with respect to your property, and I need to speak to the township planner as well as code enforcement. I have not done that yet.
Would you recommend that I come back next month, or Caleb has my contact information if you want?
Yes, I
We should
have.
try to have an answer for you next month.
Okay, I'll be back. One last question. Would that mean that this difference of opinion that I have with our zoning department, not quite sure I would use the exact term that you used, will that be held at bay until next month, until we get more discussion on the topic?
I can't make that determination until I speak to zoning.
Okay then, thank you. Got better this month.
Did you sign in, ma'am?
Yes, I did, sir.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Nick Homiak, Lake Hiawatha. What we're hearing here is the killing of the host that this system in this country does to the ordinary person by not contributing to the common good, because government is the solution, not the problem. And we rob the poor and give to the rich. And now we have a lake that nobody wants to take care of for a few extra dollars. Unbelievable. So what good is the rateable chase done Parsippany? I didn't see Mayor Soriano's speech as doom and gloom. I saw it as reality. And where is this large tax increase? The last tax increase that I remember was for the average person in Parsippany, $5 and change. So if you're living in a $300,000 home, you give $5. I don't see that as a large tax increase. You want to do something for senior citizens? You want to see Jersey Joe Panaccio and all of these Republican representatives that we have? Tell them to end the Board of Education taxes for seniors retired on set incomes. I can't even afford to have my teeth fixed, and I worked all my life, but I had some hard turns. We already gave to the common good. Now it's time for them to give back to us, the senior citizen. Let all these other people who have the kids in the school, let them pay. Get the senior citizens on set incomes that are retired and the Board of Education taxes, and it can be done. To me, you don't need a rocket scientist. Another thing, there is a difference between the zoning board of adjustments and the planning board. But then again, there isn't. And this is what I mean by this. You want to extend your driveway or put a walk-in. That's a minor change. But also, going before the zoning board, things like water view, things like Mossberg's, 180 units he wants now up on Route 10. Even the Liquid Church recently, 150 truckloads of dirt to extend their parking lot. Those are big changes, and they need to be scrutinized. And you want to be nice to everybody, you want to make everybody's life better, is one thing. But when the zoning board is faced with these big adjustments, it's like you might as well be at the planning board. And I think that this ordinance that Mayor Soriano is trying to pass, I don't know how powerful it would really be. Next week I'm going to ask some questions on it. But I think if it's been around since 2013. I wonder what would have happened if we could have appealed what happened to Waterview when we got the overwhelming no vote, and then we had the carpet pulled out from underneath us. I wonder what would have happened if we would have had that ordinance back then. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll have some questions about the ordinance next week for Mr. Locke. So, good night.
Get ready.
Back there somewhere.
I see him, okay, he's sitting down, okay.
My name is Bob. My name is Bob Venezia, and I live at 102 Brooklawn Drive. I watched the video recording of the mayor's State of the Township address in its entirety, and I now like to offer my comments and suggestions on its contents. First off, I'd like to commend the mayor on his outstanding presentation skills. He's really good. There were several items in the address that were also commendable. In the area of community relations, I've heard a lot of positive feedback about the neighborhood town meetings, and I think the plans to upgrade the business district in Lake Hiawatha will pay dividends for the community and for the township as a whole. But there were two very important areas that the State of the Township address did not handle well at all, and that's the zoning board proposal and the budget. My immediate reaction to the proposal to allow residents to appeal zoning board decisions was twofold. One, why weren't appeals to the planning board decisions also included, since they have as much impact on development in the township as does the zoning board? And two, why bother to have a zoning board at all? Under an appeals process, council members would have to review all the voluminous materials associated with every appealed case in its entirety. And I would expect every pro-development zoning board decision to be appealed, since there are at least some objectors to every major project that is proposed. Council members have neither the time nor the expertise to evaluate expert presentations and testimony, traffic studies, environmental studies, professional maps and blueprints, and input from the public that are necessary to implement an appeals process. And, okay, and now I want to get to the budget. The budget mess and the effects of two 0% rate increases in 2013 and 2017 are highly exaggerated. First, it's important to note that by law, budget expenses cannot exceed budget revenues. So any year that had a 0% tax increase also had a 0% spending increase. Second, other townships often come in with budget increases that are less than the 2% cap, and zero increases are not uncommon. For example, Mayor Fulop of Jersey City, whose name was mentioned in the State of the Township address, had 0% tax increases for 4 consecutive years, 2014 and 2017. And our own Mimi Letts, a fiscally conservative Democrat, levied a 0% tax increase in 2001, which also happened to be an election year. One final point about the 0% rate increases. Although the previous administration did levy 0% increases twice, the average increase during their 8 years in office was 1.86%, very close to the maximum allowable 2%. And at an average annual increase just below the maximum allowable 2%, the current administration cannot credibly blame 2 years of zero increases for creating a budgetary crisis. It's common knowledge that balancing the general budget has become dependent on annual cash infusion from the utility surpluses. But the drain on these surpluses has now reached a point where transfers will be unsustainable in the future. In all fairness, the current administration had nothing to do with creating this problem. But after 2 years in office, it has also done very little to resolve it and has continued the practice of tapping the utilities to balance its own general budgets. The council president just identified over $500,000 of new spending that increased both the size and the salaries of our government. Applying these funds to reducing the utility transfer amount would have gone a long way in strengthening their surpluses. Instead, last year the administration chose to apply a small token amount of $50,000 to shore up the utilities. However, note that the total annual transfer amount from the utilities is about $3 million. If the administration continues its policy of reducing the transfer amount by $50,000 each year, it'll take 60 years before the entire $3 million transfer amount is totally dissolved. There needs to be a better plan. As part of this year's budget process, which is currently underway, I asked the administration to include a new plan to manage transfers between the utilities and the general budget. The plan does not have to be radical. There's no need to totally eliminate transfers unless conditions in the utilities warrant it. And there may be budget years when no action needs to
Sir,
be
time-
taken.
Time is up.
I got like 2 sentences. You don't want me to come back in 2 weeks for 2 sentences, because I'll do it.
All right, finish the 2
You're
sentences.
gonna be here either way, Bob. We both know that. Come on.
Bob, you got 15 seconds. Go
All right.
ahead.
First, the plan should use standard accounting guidelines to define a minimum surplus for each utility. Then it must prescribe steps that are to be taken in any year where the utility surpluses dip below their minimum amounts. And finally, the plan must be achievable in a reasonable amount of time. Questions, comments?
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Good evening, everybody. And I'll face the council. First of all, I hope you can really work out this situation in Lake Parsippany. I wish the best to both sides.
Name and address, please, sir.
I know, you're right. I'm sorry, Council President. Excuse me. I should know better, shouldn't I? But I'm here tonight to talk about,
We need your name.
huh?
Name and address.
Can't hear me?
We could hear you,
Na-
but we need your name
name
and
and
address.
address for the
Okay.
record.
Name's James Robert Barberio. I'll give you the whole name. 137 Minnehaha Boulevard. I've been living in Parsippany for more than 50-something years, since 1964. So now you got my whole history. I'm the former mayor of the township of Parsippany-Troy Hills as well. I'm here to address the Mayor Serrano's state of the town. And I wrote some stuff down because it's kind of absurd that he continues to blame the past administration. Okay? I have stayed quiet for 2 years because I felt it was my responsibility to allow the mayor, the new mayor, to govern the township of Parsippany-Troy Hills. But obviously he cannot do that. Halfway into his term, he continues to blame me for all his woes. I accomplished a lot, and I'm proud of my accomplishments. I take responsibility for my accomplishments and for the things that I did as the mayor. Because that's what leaders do. Leaders don't point fingers. Leaders don't say it's your fault. I left the town in great fiscal shape. He wants to believe that it didn't. I had 2 0% interest. I mean, 2 0%, no increases in 13 and 17. Why could I do it in 2017? Because when I became the mayor in 2010, the township was in dire straits. And it's no other administration's fault. The bottom fell out in the market, okay? Ratables were going down. Businesses were leaving. When I walked into town, we were 4.7 million square feet of office space down. There's 26 million square feet of office space in all of Morris County, 14 million lie in Parsippany. What that means is if those ratables go down, your taxes go up. Well, over my 8 years, I formed committees. I formed an action team. And in 2016, for the first time since 2006, Parsippany had its first ratable increase of $1 million. Doesn't sound like much, but now we're going to get to 17, and this is where it plays a big factor, because we discussed this in our finance committee meetings, if you remember, Loretta. $27 million increase in 2017. That was why you could have a 0%. Had nothing to do with an election. They'd like you to believe that. And another thing I didn't do when I was the mayor, I didn't hire all these political cronies. I didn't do that. I kept everybody. In fact, the Daily Record's first article about me was, and they said something good about me, which I couldn't believe, that he didn't let anybody go. Because you know why? I believed in continuity. I believe in giving everybody a chance. My fellow residents, all I can tell you is this. Because you keep hearing taxes are going to go up. Now, when you heard what Mr. Homiak said about $5, they would have went up more, but this council knocked down the mayor's increase. I don't know what you had of that. Was it 6-7%? You brought it down to 2.78%, something like that?
2.8.
That is why your taxes didn't go up significantly. You know, and I will say this, and I wish the mayor were here, but he's not tonight. I'll get him at the next meeting, because I will talk about the sewer surplus. Nobody knows that sewer treatment plant better than me. I remember that sewer treatment plant when it was losing money like you couldn't imagine. It was dilapidated. Okay, had no surplus coming in it. I left it with $10 million.
1 minute.
I left it with $10 million. And I will tell you this, Janice, 0 is 0, and 0 is 0. And I'll explain to you what 0 means at the next meeting. Because everyone says 0 is not really 0, but Mr. Venenzia, he explained it pretty well what 0 meant. Okay, the bottom line is this. Hold on to your wallets. Unless this council doesn't give them the tax increases that you want, nail your wallets down, because they're going to go up if he gets his way. You know, some of you know my mother, some of you don't. But she did instill one thing in me. You take responsibility for your own actions. When I was the mayor, there was things I took responsibility for. I got hit with 3 major storms. I didn't blame nobody. I just went to work, rolled my sleeves up, because that's what leaders do. Until this mayor can be a leader, I'll be here every time he mentions my name, and I promise you that. And thank you for your time, and I appreciate everything that you're doing. And I will be back, and I will be back, and I will show you budget from budget to budget, and why it's increasing, and why it increased from 2018 when it all started. In 2018, you got significant increases, and I can show it to you. Thank you.
You're right in line.
All right. Good evening, everyone. All the
Just
people
need
here tonight.
name and address, please.
Name and address. Louis Ulano, 28 Wesley Place, Mount Tabor, New Jersey. All right. So I'm the chief of the Parsippany Rescue and Recovery Unit, and I just want to thank all of you up here for your support over the years, especially recently. You know, you guys allotted us a lot of capital funding to help replace outdated equipment and vehicles. And this support hasn't been unnoticed, and it couldn't be done without you. So I just want to say thank you.
Did you, Louis, did you sign in? Just, you sign in. Thank you.
Let's close.
Anyone else want to speak?
Barney Collins, 60 Old Cherry Hill Road. Yes, there is a house there. I'm glad to see that some people are safety-minded. Thank you for that earlier, Khalid.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm here to address some other concerns other than money. Public safety, which apparently doesn't rank too high on the list of priorities here. There have been a number of recent events, including minor children, violent events, attacks on kids, more specifically in the Lake Hiawatha region. And I was just wondering what the action plan is, Mr. Soriano. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Again, I will address this probably next week when he may be here.
You
and
can,
may be prepared to answer my
You can address this to the chair, and I will relay it to the administration if you want.
Yeah, please.
I'm sure he's very well aware. I've written to his office personally and specifically detailed all the information.
Okay, I'm aware of it too, and I would like to request that the mayor and the police chief report to the council the incidents that these 4 individuals, how many police reports do we have, who are they, do they live here, and what action has been taken each time the police were called.
Mr. Collins, I think most importantly is, how is your son?
My son, to put it simply, physical harm heals. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Yes.
All right.
Some of the people in this audience don't know what you're talking about. Do you want to just briefly do a...
Oh, sure. In recent weeks, there was an incident, including the 4 individuals that you're speaking about, where they assaulted. They're, mind you, between 18 and 22 years of age, assaulted a minor child in the Dunkin' Donuts parking lot on North Pevwick Road. A couple days ago, my son was assaulted at the McDonald's by the Target by the same 4 individuals. He's 14 years old. However, in the eyes of law enforcement, this falls under 2C, which is a misdemeanor. Unfortunately, slap on the wrist, which is left for them to come out on the street the next day and the next day and the next day. What I wanted to address to Mr. Soriano is, nobody cares about a ban on plastic bags. What we don't want to see is a bag zipped up with one of our kids in it. What's he gonna do?
Okay, hopefully, the report that I requested will be, we will have at our next meeting. Anyone else? I'll entertain a
Come on,
motion.
no, hold on, we have someone.
My name's Lori Chute.
Just need you to speak up a little bit, ma'am.
I feel like I am. I live at 58 Nokomis Avenue in Lake Hiawatha. For 25 years, I've walked on the golf courses when they're closed. They were purchased with Green Acres money. In the last year or so, I've noticed that there are a large number of mature oak trees, mostly oak trees, that are being cut, especially on the west course. And I want to know why. Many of them, when I count the growth rings on those trees, they're 200 or 300 years old. Trees like that, especially oak trees, they support a great deal of wildlife, including beneficial insects, butterflies, birds, mammals. Why are they being cut down? They're not being replaced. Some of them may be old, but they're not diseased. Some are in perfect shape. Someone told me that they plan to cut down 150 trees. I don't know why. I'd like to know more. What's going on there? You know, that golf course, it's a beautiful place, and it's not just a place where people can play golf all, part of the year. It's an ecosystem. There's all kinds of animals that live there, native plants. There's a hawk that depends on the squirrels and chipmunks that live in those trees. So, if it's Green Acres land, are they allowed to cut so many trees that are healthy?
When you're done, I'll try to answer.
Okay.
Are you finished?
That's what I would like to know.
Okay. If you'll recall, the Knoll Country Club was completed in 1926. Okay. I'll try. The golf course was completed, the west course was completed in 1926. And many of those trees were mature then.
Yes.
And that's almost 100 years ago, and they were mature then. Some of them are diseased, some of them are dangerous. Some of the branches are beginning to fall down, which are a hazard. The only trees that are selected to come down are those which either are diseased or have become a hazard to the golf course. And that decision is not made by us, it's made by Parks and Forestry and experts at the Knoll Country Club.
Who is it? It's Forestry?
Parks and Forestry.
Is that they've contracted with that company?
No, Parks and Forestry is the township.
Oh,
Parks.
Parks and Forestry.
Yes.
They're the ones who are cutting.
Well, the head of Parks and Forestry is our expert in town on trees, and the experts at the Knoll do lean on him for his guidance.
Should I talk to him?
The other trees in town that are coming down, you might see in neighborhoods, are the ash trees.
I'm aware of that problem. I know about it.
Okay, all right. Again,
These
that's
are
a
not ash
recommendation.
trees.
No, that's the recommendation. You can talk to our Parks and Forestry Director is Jimmy Walsh.
Yeah,
Give him a call, he'll explain it to you.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call. Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson? Yes. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Floor is closed.
I'd like to just say, I'm sure it was asked of us, there was a lot of people that were asking us what we're going to do for you. As of right now, I know it's been stated that there's not much that we can do. I want to state for myself, I agree wholeheartedly with what's been done. It's a disgrace to you how the association went about it. It was brought up, this is just my opinion, it was brought up that maybe they could have asked for donations and gone about it a different way. I grew up in the lake. I was a lake member for many years when my parents joined the lake when I was a child. I understand the situation that they're in right now, but I totally agree with you. I just want you to know that I pledge my support 100% for what you're trying to do here and to help you any way that I can.
All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break and then we'll be back. We're going to reconvene the meeting. They're still making noise in the hall.
No, thank gosh.
Okay, we're going to reconvene the meeting. Roll call, please.
Mr. Carriffy?
Here.
Ms. Grignani?
Present.
Ms. McCarthy?
Here.
Ms. Peterson? Mr. DePiero?
Here.
Okay.
Okay, we're in business.
Okay.
We're up to ordinances for introduction.
Ordinance 2020:6, an ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, County of New Jersey. You know, this particular ordinance, I'd like to table this.
You could do a motion to table.
I'll do a motion to table this.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So-
I would prefer to just defeat it and kill it.
Well, we can vote on the motion now, and then we can continue. Since we have a motion by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Ms. Peterson, this is a motion to table ordinance 2020:06. At this point, I'll go ahead and take roll. Mr. Carriffy?
No.
Ms. Grignani?
No, I'd like to continue with this ordinance, please.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
No, I'd like to vote on it and defeat it.
Okay, motion fails, so now we'll go ahead and continue.
An ordinance of the Township Council, the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, Morris County, New Jersey, authorizing appeals from the Township Zoning Board of the Board of Adjustments to the Township Council pursuant to NJSA 40:55D-17. Be it resolved that the above ordinance be introduced, read by title, and passed on the first reading at a meeting of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills held on February 18th, 2020, and that said ordinance be further considered for a second reading and final passage at a meeting to be held on March 17th, 2020 at 7 p.m. prevailing time, or as soon thereafter as the matter may be reached at the municipal building in said township, in which time all persons interested shall be given an opportunity to be heard concerning said ordinance. Be it further resolved that the clerk be authorized and directed to advertise said ordinance with the notice of introduction thereof being published in the official newspaper according to law. Motion to approve. Your vote.
Need a second?
For discussion purposes only, I will second.
So we have
So
motion
now,
made.
so now we are in the discussion stage.
Correct.
Okay. Loretta, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I will. As council, we are not experts in planning and land use laws. We have an excellent planner on the board who knows this town like the back of his hand and was involved for many years in our master plans. I suggest we leave these matters to the experts. The administration has another option, one being having an attorney representing the administration to convey the administration's objections regarding development in this area.
You know, I'd just like to say that, you know, these ordinances, these zoning ordinances are passed by the council. And the zoning board then makes the decision. And according to the information that we have, it's often, in most cases, about 90-some% of the cases, they're approving changes to these ordinances.
Well, what they're primarily doing is a lot of lots in Parsippany are non-conforming. So anything a resident does in a non-conforming lot, change the air conditioner, put in a roof on new siding, they have to go for variance because they live on a non-conforming lot, and that's outrageous. But that's a lot of what they have to do. In the case of Masterbrook, where the developer built large houses so he could maximize impervious coverage on the size of the house, but then he did not build a deck. So everyone who bought those houses had to go for a variance to the Board of Adjustment, the zoning board, to put a deck on their house. It's ridiculous. So yeah, a lot of what they're going to vote on are nuisance things like that have to be voted on. The major reason we should not do this is the zoning board and the planning board both have planners that advise them, attorneys that advise them, and engineers that advise them to make sure they stay within the land use laws, make sure they understand the current zoning in the area, and they hear the entire application. The applicants present their experts under testimony and under oath. The zoning board can ask questions, can question their own experts for advice, and it's due process. They have followed due process. Anytime the zoning board approves an application, they have followed due process. Now, what this ordinance wants us to do is if some residents disagree with the zoning board's decision, that we should overrule them. In order for us to overrule them, we would have to, first of all, go back and listen to all the testimony that was given during the application. We still would not have the advice of the zoning board attorney, planner, and engineer, and we would not be able to question the applicant. And yet some residents might want us to overturn that ordinance. It would be a nightmare. And all these applicants would have to do is go to court and say, I followed due process, the zoning board said okay, and now the council's playing politics.
Council President, just so we're clear on the scope of the ordinance, the residential bulk conditions, things that involves dormers, decks, siding, etc., are not the subject of the ordinance. The ordinance only concerns itself with the grant of a use variance. There are 6 different types of use variances. Those types of variances, right, by their very nature, are inherently, all right, more substantial than the residential variances that most of the zoning board hears. So, use variances concern themselves with, is the use permitted? Is there a proposal to expand a non-conforming use? Is there a proposal to deviate from a conditional use standard? Is there a variance required for exceeding height, floor area coverage, and the number of permitted dwelling units? Those are the 6 type of use variances.
And most of those, as I understand it, have to do with development.
Correct, and for the most part, non-residential development, meaning non-single family homes, You know, but by the nature of the use variances that we just talked about, they're almost always implicate more significant commercial development.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that everybody understands what the scope of the ordinance is. It would only be applicable to the grant of a use variance by the zoning board, not the residential, what are called residential C variances that, for the most part, concern themselves with one and two family homes.
Right, and I think the other thing to be clear about is that this council appoints the members to this zoning board. So essentially, you know, they're supporting the zoning board and the decisions that they make, you know, by proxy. So, you know, I think it's very important to understand that when you look to the zoning board's decision, you also have to look to the council that appoints those members to the zoning board. So, you know.
Can I also just state for the record, we went back and looked at the number of use variances, not the decks and the dormers, but the actual large-scale development use variances. And in the years 2014 through 2018, there were 59 that were yes, 7 that were withdrawn applications, and 2 that were denied. So in a total of 70 or so, 60 were approved that would classify. That's not to determine how I'm going to vote on this ordinance, but just for the record, those are the numbers.
And of course, the appeal would have to be taken by an interested party. Somebody would have to affirmatively step forward and file the petition to appeal. So it wouldn't require that council review every use variance that was granted. That's not to say that, you know, some of the use variances granted by the zoning board are appropriate. I'm sure they are, based on the evidence and the testimony that was heard by the board. The appeal process, as proposed in the ordinance, would give council some oversight through checks and balances to monitor what the zoning board has done.
Through you, Council President, I have a question for Jim. Jim, what are the legalities of the administration, either through an attorney or directly from the front office, putting their opinions or objections to a potential application on the record before it's heard by the board?
So they can't do it before the application is heard. They can do it during the application process. It's not typically done. Some communities have appointed a public advocate, all right, to advocate for members of the public in connection with use variance proceedings.
Okay, any more discussion?
I'm going to make a comment right before I vote.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, and since there's no more discussion.
Okay.
This is discussion.
All right, then I'll make my points now. It was brought up earlier that the planning board's decisions are pretty much in line, the amount that get approved, as the Board of Adjustment. Board of Adjustment's appointed by us. We have a large board that does their homework, spends many hours, it's a volunteer, many hours. They listen to experts, they get expert testimony, they get feedback. If we're looking to do this, then what's to say why aren't we doing an ordinance to be able to override the planning board as well? So, but you know, I'm throwing that out there. Okay?
Right. No, it's a legitimate observation, and I want to explain the distinction because it's an important legal distinction. I don't want to cut you off, but go ahead.
Okay. So, to me, it's a redundancy. We have a planning board that's made up of multiple members that hear all this testimony, spend hours and hours going over everything, and then they come up and they make a decision. So we're just going to say, well, if somebody doesn't like it, well, they just come to us, and then we got to just do everything all over again, and we're not experts on it. I think it's a waste of time when they have those experts listening to the original testimony, listening to the experts, the feedback, getting everything from them before they make their decision. And they are making their decision based on everything that they are getting. And this ordinance would just let us just say, well, you know what? We didn't like what you did, so we're going to override it. I totally disagree with that.
So as I said, you know, all I do is draft the ordinances. I don't have a position one way or the other, but just so everybody understands how the law operates here, there is no opportunity under the municipal land use law for a governing body to review the decisions of the planning board. The reason for that is that when the application is heard at the planning board, the use is permitted. The planning board's function in that case is to assess compliance with the site plan and subdivision standards. So if a planning board makes an error and a member of the public thinks that they're aggrieved based on that determination, their only remedy is to go see a judge in court. Contrast that with the zoning board, all right, where the nature of the application, as I explained previously, right, is a significant departure from the zoning ordinance use requirements. All right, and therefore is viewed as, at least initially, as an impairment to what council has already decided pursuant to an adopted zoning ordinance, as well as a potential impairment to the intent and purpose of the master plan. So the considerations are different. One relates to compliance with site plan and subdivision standards, which for the most part are largely engineering considerations, all right, as opposed to the zoning board when it hears a use variance application where there's already been a determination made by mayor and council when they adopted a zoning ordinance as to whether or not the use is permitted. So there's an important distinction there. The municipal land use law only allows council, all right, to review the grant of a use variance.
No, I get all that. I mean, I was just throwing that
No,
out
no,
as
no,
an example that, you know, the planning board does their research, does everything, and who's to say that, you know, I mean, why would somebody just want to just wipe out all of their work that they did and be able to do that? I just don't agree with, I think, you know, we have a board of adjustment. These people have been on there. They're put on there. They do all the, first off, they don't get paid. It's all volunteer. They're spending hours and hours of doing this research, listening to experts. They have the planning. They have their attorney. They have their experts. They're getting their feedback. Then they make their educated decision. And now you're just going to be able to say, well, you know what? We don't like it. We're going to the council. We want that thrown out.
That's absolutely true. I sat as a zoning board member many years ago in the community that I live, all right? It is a thankless job. I recognize that. The reason why the law provides for the appeal process is one that concerns what's called deference to legislative action, all right? In the land use law, the grant of the use variance is viewed as an extraordinary measure. Planning and zoning decisions, and there's a legion of case law on this, all right, is to be accomplished through compliance with the ordinance, not by granting exceptions to the ordinance. And that's what the zoning board does. The zoning board grants exceptions. That's the very nature of what they do. So that's the reason. It's deference to what the mayor and council decided initially with respect to the zoning ordinance. That's why the appeal process is allowed. It's not an opportunity for, you know, members of mayor and council to, you know, poke at the zoning board on a particular decision. It's one of a policy consideration about the importance of the nature of the variance that will be granted, right, or that could be granted.
Any more discussion?
No, we'll call for a vote.
Okay, let's call for a vote. So we had a motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
No.
Ms. Grignani?
No.
Ms. McCarthy?
I'm going to abstain on this because I think there's a lot more information that needs to be determined and what the process is. But I will say that I think if the council is approving and passing ordinances and to have them, these ordinances or the decisions that they make so consistently, it seems, to be an issue. I mean, you know, I think the due diligence is on the council's part also when they approve these zoning ordinances. And, you know, to have them change or make a decision on them so consistently seems to be questionable.
Ms. Peterson?
What Janice said, I abstain.
Okay. And then Mr. DePiero.
Well, just one point on what Janice said. Zoning usually occurs in large tracts of land, not one particular lot, but large tracts of land. If there is an application that wants to have a use that's different than the zoning in that area, okay? The law has provided a way for the applicant to deal with that. It's called a variance. If the council were to change the zoning for that one piece of land, okay, that's called spot zoning, and that is illegal. The remedy for that is for the Board of Adjustment to grant variances for smaller parcels of land that will not be in violation of the land use law.
Again, it has nothing to do with the bulk condition of the lot. It has to do with the use.
Okay,
I vote no.
Okay, so we have 3 noes. The motion passes. And just for clarification for the record, the next ordinance coming up, 2020-07, is not related, nor it has nothing to do with ordinance number 1.
Right.
So this way everybody knows and is aware.
Ordinance 2020:07. An ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, Morris County, New Jersey, amending and supplementing Chapter 430, zoning of the Township Code. Be it resolved that the above ordinance be introduced, read by title, and passed on first reading at a meeting of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, held on February the 18th, 2020, and that said ordinance be further considered for second reading and final passage at a meeting to be held on March 17th, 2020, at 7 p.m. prevailing time, or as soon thereafter as the matter may be reached, at the municipal building in said township, at which time all persons interested shall be given an opportunity to be heard concerning said ordinance. Be it further resolved that the clerk be authorized and directed to advertise said ordinance, with the notice of introduction thereof being published in the official newspaper according to law. Motion?
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Mr. Carriffy. Any discussion? None? Roll
Council
call?
President, I spoke to the township planner about this. She'll be available at second reading. Most of the changes contained in 2020-07 are definitional changes. There is also some new regulation of outdoor storage pods that have been recommended some time ago, and we'll have a full explanation of that at second reading.
Thank you.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Second reading and public hearing, ordinance 2020:03. Bond ordinance reappropriating $250,000 proceeds of obligations not needed for the original purpose in order to provide for other expenses to the Knoll West Clubhouse building at the Golf and Recreational Utility in and by the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills in the County of Morris, New Jersey. The notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record, the official newspaper of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, on January 27, 2020. This ordinance was introduced at the January 21, 2020 regular meeting. Motion to accept the ordinance 2020:03 be heard in its second and final reading, entitled by myself.
Second?
Motion made by Mr. Carriffy, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Make a motion to open up the public hearing on this ordinance and this ordinance only.
Second?
Motion made by Mr. Carriffy, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Floor is open on this ordinance only. Seeing no one else.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Carriffy, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Okay.
Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on second reading and a hearing held thereon, now therefore be it resolved that said ordinance be passed on final reading and that a notice of final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution of the
Second.
above made by myself.
Motion
Second?
made by Mr. Carriffy, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Ordinance 2020:04. Bond ordinance providing for the replacement of the irrigation system at the Knoll West Golf Course at the golf and recreational utility in and by the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills in the County of Morris, New Jersey, appropriating $400,000 therefore and authorizing the issuance of $400,000 bonds or notes of the Township for financing the cost thereof. The notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record, the official newspaper of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, on January 27, 2020. This ordinance was introduced at the January 21st, 2020 regular meeting. Motion to accept that this ordinance 2020:04 be heard in its second and final reading by title only by myself.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Mr. Carriffy. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Public hearing 2020:04. Motion to open the public hearing for ordinance 2020:04.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Mr. Carriffy. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Floor is open on this ordinance only. Seeing no one else?
Motion to close the public hearing for ordinance 2020:04.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Mr. Carriffy. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Floor is closed.
Whereas the ordinance was read in title on second reading and a hearing held thereon, now therefore be it resolved that the ordinance be passed on final reading and that a notice of final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Mr. Carriffy. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani? Ms.
Yes.
McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Ordinance 2020:05, an ordinance establishing hourly wage ranges for blue-collar supervisor employees of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills, 2019 to 2022. The notice of this ordinance above was published in the Daily Record and the official newspaper of Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills on February 10, 2020. This ordinance was introduced at the February 2020 agenda meeting. Motion to accept the ordinance 2020:5 be heard in its second and final reading by title only.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Public hearing 2020:05, motion to open the public hearing on ordinance 2020:5.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Ms. Grignani. We'll give it to Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Okay,
See no one come forward. Motion to close the public hearing on ordinance 2020:05.
Is there a second?
Second.
motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy? Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Floor is
Whereas-
closed.
Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on the second reading and a hearing held thereon, now therefore be it resolved that said ordinance be passed on the final reading and that the notice of the final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Motion passes.
And Council President, just for the record, that ordinance that was just adopted correlates with item 1 on the consent agenda, which is the ratification of that contract for the blue-collar supervisors.
Yes, okay. Non-consent agenda, resolutions, 2020-065, appropriation transfer. Motion to approve the resolution above.
Second.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Resolution 2020-066, a resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills authorizing budget appropriation reserves transfers. Motion to approve the above resolution made by myself.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Carriffy, seconded by Ms. McCarthy. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Be it resolved, all items listed with an asterisk are routine and non-controversial by the Township Council and will be approved in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. McCarthy. Roll call, Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Approval of payroll and bills list. CFO Ancucci recommends authorization for the payment. 1, authorized payment of the February 21st, 2020 regular miscellaneous payroll estimated at $1,500,000. 2, payment of the bills for voucher list of 3/1/20 through 3/3/20, $3,840,888. Yeah, no. Motion to approve the authorization of the payment above.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. Carriffy. Roll call. Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Executive session. Whereas the Open Public Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231, permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, and whereas the Township Council is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist, and whereas the Township Council wishes to discuss attorney-client privilege, hotel liquor license request, attorney-client privilege, NJHMFA pilot agreement. And whereas minutes will be kept, and once the matter involving the confidentiality of the above no longer requires confidentiality, the minutes can be made public. Now therefore be resolved by the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany-Troy Hills that the public be excluded from this meeting. Motion to adjourn to a closed session.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Mr. Carriffy. Roll call. Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
We're going
Mr.
to
Lott,
adjourn
do we
into
an-
closed session.
Do we anticipate anything, any
I'm not
voting?
anticipating any action, Mr. President.
Okay,
No
thank you.
action.
No action will be anticipated.
Right, we are back on the record.
Make a motion to reconvene?